Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Hakumei in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 10, Part 2, Precious People. Haku actually liked to get up early in the morning. He had never been able to sleep in for much longer than 7 anyway. Getting up with the sun really didn't bother him at all. He was up before the others. Kimimaro was probably going to sleep late since he had had a little fun with Kiba that night, and it usually took a lot to wake up Naruto or Niji when he was sick. Hinata's eyes opened briefly when he passed the living room, but she nodded, knowing just what he was going out for. Sakura didn't even move, she was too used to his footsteps. Gaara was sitting on the porch watching the dawn come. Has anything happened? Haku asked. Nothing worth mentioning, Gaara shook his head. There haven't been any signs of life that I didn't expect to hear, other than the fact that someone found one of the traps that we set around the house. I bet that was exciting for him. Haku smiled at the thought. All of them had been rather creative with their traps. Yeah, he fell into Naruto's, which made him fall into yours. Gaara was smirking a little. I really wasn't expecting anyone to fall into it. Haku trailed off. I mean, Naruto's pit that was filled with, what was it again? I don't know, but it smelled awful. Gaara shook his head. I don't know where he got it, but he really worked hard to get it. Whatever it wasn't too bad compared to what happened when he crawled out, only to face your barrage of senbon leading straight into a patch of those hallucinogenic mushrooms. Was he really bad? Haku asked guiltily. He ran up thinking that I was a buxom blonde woman of about 20-something, Gaara told him, then he decided that I was his mother. Haku didn't know what to say to that. Naruto and Hinata were right, you know, Gaara said, turning back to the sunrise, you really are a closet evil mastermind. Haku didn't bother to tell him that that wasn't true. It had been said so many times, and there was nothing that he had ever been able to say to stop the joke. Sometimes he supposed that it was best to ignore some things. He left Gaara to his thoughts on the morning and began on the path. It would probably take him some time to find what he was looking for. The herbs he needed weren't uncommon, but they were picky about where they grew. The forest looked like a good place to start. He would need to find a clearing and with some water close by, but not right on it. He swung the basket in his hands absently. He hadn't been as talented with medical ninjutsu as Sakura or Hinata, but he had shown remarkable talent with herbs and their uses. He liked to work with them as well. They were effective, they seemed so simple and, if applied right, they could have rather interesting effects on people too, but Haku only studied a little of that. Usually, he didn't need to use his herbs, so he only had the ones that he absolutely needed or were very rare stored in small scrolls that he carried with him. Some splashes of sunlight were beginning to make their way through the trees and he could see a small clearing up ahead. Haku walked a little faster, since he really didn't want to have to fight with someone who found him out there. While Haku didn't mind fighting, as long as killing wasn't involved, he liked to avoid a battle when at all possible. He entered the clearing and was temporarily blinded by the sunlight, but when his eyes had adjusted, he realized that he wasn't alone. There was someone at the other side of the clearing leaning over some plants, examining them. She was about his age, with dark hair that was in 2 low pigtails that ended a little past her neck. Her clothes were simple and seemed to be mostly made up of bandages. Some of them were on her face as well, Haku realized as she turned to him. Her eyes were dark too, and Haku couldn't ever remember seeing such a defeated-looking person. Hello, he called. The girl started, she probably hadn't seen him come up. She relaxed a little when she saw him, but Haku could see that part of her was just as on her guard as it would have if she had stiffed. Is this place yours? She asked. Her voice was soft, but somewhat dead. Haku noticed that her head was down most of the time, and she seemed like she didn't want to make direct eye contact with him. He wondered if she was self-conscious because of the bandages. No, Haku said with a small smile, I don't know who this forest belongs to, if anyone. I'm here to get some herbs for a friend who needs them. Oh, the girl said softly, I'm here for the same reason. Then there's no reason why we can't pick these herbs together, Haku said, my name is Haku. Isaribi, the girl said, not looking at him again, but Haku could tell that she was telling the truth. Haku walked up and joined her in bending over the herbs. Isaribi seemed to know a little about herb lore, but some of the herbs that were very useful for medical purposes were ones that she was ignoring. Haku wasn't sure if this was on purpose or accidental, so he decided to ask. Is your friend sick or wounded? Haku asked. Why do you want to know? She was suddenly defensive. Her eyes had the look of a cornered rabbit, wide, afraid, desperate. Well, it affects the herbs. Haku didn't act like he had noticed anything. Some of the herbs that you're picking up are good for treating wounds, but you're leaving others that are just as good. Oh. Isaribi murmured, my friend is wounded. He was hurt by a sharp object that pieced part of his side. Then they should use some of these. Haku gestured over to a group of small plants with white, star-like flowers. They're probably the most useful for treating wounds, and they only open at this time of day. Thank you. Isaribi said, bowing slightly, you're very kind, ma'am. Haku almost groaned and explained that he was a guy, but decided against it. She was so nervous anyways that if he told her he was male, she might run away, thinking he was going to molest her or something. For a while they picked their herbs as silence, but then Isaribi spoke in halting tones. Why are you working so hard for your friend? She asked, are they going to help you? Haku laughed a little, you might be able to say that. They help me all the time, but I don't think that it's in the way you mean. Tell me, is your friend a precious person to you? Are they someone who you wish to protect? What do you mean? Isaribi asked. It's only when they're protecting someone that a person can truly be strong. Everyone has something or someone to them that is so precious that it's worth dying for. Haku said, people form bonds with one another, protect their precious people and are protected in turn. It's this cycle of protecting and being protected, caring and being cared for that people understand as loyalty, friendship, and even love. Yes, my friend does something for me, all of them do, they acknowledge my existence. Bonds like that only hinder you, Isaribi said coldly, my friend is someone who I need at the moment, but that's all. Haku smiled gently as he picked his herbs. That's not true even in nature. For instance, nothing is more dangerous than a mother that is protecting its children. Animals will attack and win against enemies that they should have been crushed by. In my opinion, the only way to become truly strong and truly happy is to have people around you who are precious. I disagree, Isaribi shook her head, it's a sweet way to see the world in a kind one, but the world isn't like that. The only person who you can trust is yourself, and you do what you can to help yourself. Well, Haku said, not really wanting to get into a conflict over opposing philosophies, maybe one day we'll see each other again, and we'll be able to see whose belief is best, but unfortunately I have to leave now, I have all that I needed. Isaribi looked somewhat disappointed in this turn of events. Haku wondered if she was actually enjoying their disagreement. Perhaps she didn't know all that many people. Haku straightened and prepared to leave when he heard the sound of Isaribi clearing her throat. Haku turned around, his eyebrows raised. I hope that your dreams don't get replaced with my reality, she said softly. Haku knew that he should probably be offended by the way she had said that, but couldn't find it in himself. To be honest, and he hated to admit it, even to himself, he sort of pitied her. She was someone who really had nothing. Haku had known that feeling longer than he would have liked, and he wondered just what would have happened to him if he hadn't met Naruto that night. Would he have latched onto some other person in desperation, or would he have become like Isaribi, cold, untrusting, and sure that bonds with people only caused sorrow? And I hope that your reality shows itself to be more kind than you thought. Haku walked away and stopped with his back towards her, and by the way, I'm male. Isaribi stopped, and looked at the retreating back of the boy. She had completely thought that he was a woman. He didn't act like any of the men that she had met, and Isaribi had met quite a few. He had seemed polite, and usually when she met people, they would glare at her in a suspicious way and whisper behind their hands when she was gone. Before she could orient herself to say anything else on the matter, Haku was gone. She stood, looking after him for some time, but returned to her own work. Zabuza would need these soon, and he was in pain. He was always more unpleasant when he was in pain. Isaribi wished that she had had the presence of mind to ask Haku what kind of herbs would sweeten the demon of the mist's disposition, but she doubted that much could be done. She hoped that she wouldn't meet Haku again. He had seemed like a kind person, and Isaribi had little experience with those kinds of people. At any rate, even if he was a kind person, if he got in her way, or Zabuza's way at the moment, he would have to be eliminated. Nothing would stand in the way of Isaribi becoming fully human again. Even if it involved becoming the monster that people said she was. Naruto opened his eyes blearily and sat up. Sai was still sleeping in a corner and Kimimaro was snoring slightly, but Sasuke and Neji were awake and Gaara was probably still outside. Sasuke and Neji were deeply involved in a game of shogi. Both of them had wonderful faces for it when they wanted to. They both looked like they were brooding. Naruto mumbled a good morning and ambled into the kitchen. Tsunami wasn't awake yet, and neither were the genin. Naruto had a feeling that Kiba would probably take a while to drag out of bed. Kakashi was up, reading a letter that had come from the messenger hawk that was sitting at the window, probably waiting for a reply. "Ohio, Kakashi-san," Naruto said, bowing slightly. "Ohio, Taiki-kun," Kakashi looked up from his letter. Something told Naruto that Kakashi wasn't all too happy with the content of the letter. "We're a bit early for breakfast, aren't we?" Naruto said, looking around. "Do you know when Tsunami-san will be up?" "Unfortunately no," Kakashi shook his head, "she seemed very tired last night." Naruto sighed. Actually he felt a little on the nervous side with Kakashi. The looks that he was giving Naruto always made him uneasy. He knew that this was probably a good time to give Kakashi that letter, but something held him back. Jiraiya had said that Kakashi was connected with some group that was against Danzu, but did he know that Kakashi was really against Danzu or just some sort of spy? Naruto needed some kind of proof. After all, giving Kakashi the letter might lead to revealing who he was, and that would lead to some rather unpleasant answers that might end with him dead. Naruto had heard of Sharingan Kakashi. The man was well known to be one of the most dangerous opponents during the wars, and Kumo had sent up prayers of thanks when he had been assigned a rookie genin team. He was the only non-Uchiha to have the Sharingan thanks to the dying gift of Uchiha Obito. Obito's name had been disgraced among the Uchiha, but the damage had been done. The fact was that Kakashi had the Sharingan, and there wasn't going to be an easy way to take it away. So, Kakashi had kept the Sharingan became Umbu, and even now that Umbu was unofficially disbanded, he was still Umbu level. Naruto knew that he was good, but probably not that good, yet. "Crud," he muttered. Kakashi smiled. "You kids are pretty specific about being paid for your work," he said, sounding amused. "Well, food isn't all easy to come by," Naruto said with a shrug. "We do what we can. Even go against Gato." "Even go against Gato," Naruto nodded. "There's a lot of stupid things hunger makes you do. We tried to do street performances once, but that didn't work out so well, or maybe it worked too well. I'm not sure. The point is we didn't get paid." "How long have you kids been together?" Kakashi asked. "About 6 years now," Naruto didn't lie. That would be too easy to see through. They showed no signs of ever having parents. Besides, the best lies had some truth in them. "You kids must have been pretty young," Kakashi nodded. "Did you all know each other before?" "Yes and no," Naruto shrugged. "Some of us knew each other, but not all of us." "I see. You guys were pretty lucky," Kakashi commented. "Yeah, that's about the right word too," Naruto agreed. "This was getting nowhere. We really should have died out there, but we didn't. You should see the winters around here." It was pretty clear that both of them were going to dance in circles around one another, and could do so all day. Mercifully, they were interrupted by the arrival of Haku, carrying herbs. "Is that all you are going to need?" Naruto asked. "I think so," Haku said thoughtfully. "I have all of the ones I had to get this morning that I'm going to need for a while, but some of the more common ones may run out." "Should someone stay with him?" Naruto asked, a slight grin on his face. "I don't think Haru would appreciate that." Haku trailed off at the look on Naruto's face. "You really like teasing us, don't you? The only thing better than practical jokes is annoying Haru or Masaru." Naruto was grinning ever more. "I don't really think it's necessary." Haku mumbled. Further conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps, and Kiba, with Akamaru, appeared with Shino behind him. Kiba looked awful. There were circles under his eyes as deep as Gaara's, and he looked a little jumpy for some reason. Shino didn't seem any different from yesterday, so apparently whatever had kept Kiba up, hadn't done a thing to Shino. "What's up?" Naruto asked with a grin. "Have a wild night howling at the moon." Kiba looked like he would have liked to say something back but was a little too tired to bother. "Kiba seems to have had trouble getting to sleep," Shino said in his usual toneless voice. "Well, you still have lots of training to do this morning," Kakashi said, smiling. Naruto couldn't help but feel that Kakashi was enjoying himself. Sasuke stuck his head out of the room he and the others were sharing. "Is Tsunami-san up yet?" he asked. "No," Naruto told him. Sasuke sighed and turned back inside. "Fine Haru, we'll do the tie-breaker round." Those two could never break a tie. Sasuke was excellent at finding the weaknesses in Niji's strategies, but Niji had this weird ability to analyze people and base moves on the character of the opponent. In the end, they were a great pair to have to go against one another. Naruto was better at making strategies on the field when the others' plans failed, and he wasn't as good at shogi as he would like to be. "What are they doing?" Kiba asked, yawning. "Playing shogi," Naruto said. "What, like old men?" Kiba asked derisively. "That's an interesting hobby for civilian children," Shino said, raising an eyebrow. Shogi was originally a risk-free way for people to learn strategy with the inevitable losses that would come from an inexperienced general. Some ninja still teach those children who have talent to play. Naruto shrugged. Was Shino always this creepy or was it just now? "I guess," Naruto said with a shrug, "we found an old shogi board once, and that's how Haru and Masaru got addicted to it. Yuma and Shinta are good too, but the girls, Ryu, Hideaki, and I never really liked it as much." Naruto's eyes met Shino's glasses. Shino was too smart for his own good. For the first time, Naruto wished that Sasuke had activated the Sharingan. After all, it would be able to hypnotize a person. "Yo, sensei," Kiba said, bored with the discussion, "what do we have to do today?" Shino turned towards Kakashi and seemed interested in the conversation. Naruto was really going to have to do something about that guy. "I'm sorry to have slept in," the cheerful voice of Tsunami broke into Naruto's internal debate on how best to deal with Shino. "Breakfast will be ready in a minute." Yumi didn't appear until much breakfast was almost through, but it didn't look as if she had overslept, and the contrary, she looked like she had been up for a while doing some kind of warm-ups. She looked at all of them coldly, and didn't even wish her team a good morning. She nodded at Shino and didn't even notice Kiba. "When are we beginning our training for the day, Kakashi-sensei?" she asked, completely ignoring the prior conversation between Tsunami and Sakura about recipes. "Well, I was thinking that since you've cleared the tree climbing stage, you need to wait for Kiba and Shino to catch up," Kakashi said, "so, you're going to help me watch our client." Kiba and Shino were still working on tree climbing? What were they teaching in the academy? Apparently, Danza was more worried about getting the kids into the right mindset by the time they graduated than actually changing the teaching schedule. "He's doing that so he can get out of work, isn't he?" Naruto whispered to Sasuke. "Looks like it," Sasuke hissed back. "What a lazy sensei," Hinata commented in just as soft a voice. "I can hear you," Kiba said, indignant that they would try to have a quiet conversation. "Is there something you disagree with?" Sai asked. "No, but that's not the point." Kiba shouted angrily but was cut off by the cold stare of Yumi's black eyes. "You're an embarrassment to Konoha," Yumi said. "If the civilians want to make themselves feel better then by all means, let them go ahead. They're the ones who are going to spend the rest of their lives depending on us." Yumi must have been related to Sai. She shared his offensive abilities. "You're very rude and not at all ladylike," Sai said, smiling widely. There was dead silence in the room. "You're right," Sasuke said. "I would have thought that an Uchiha would be more polite as they are the most powerful bloodline in Fire Country, but I guess I was wrong." The silent statement there no different than anyone else could be clearly understood. "Would you like me to show you what an Uchiha is capable of?" Yumi asked. "Not really," Sasuke said, smirking. "I like living." "And what's to stop me?" Yumi asked. "You're going to take the bait of some lowly civilian like me?" Suzuki said, raising an eyebrow. Not at all proper for someone from one of the greatest clans in the world. Now, everyone, settle down, Kakashi said, finally becoming involved. Yumi was silent, but her eyes stayed on Suzuki for quite a while after that. Naruto wasn't sure just what his friend had done, other than throw a challenge in the girl's face. Suzuki knew all the right buttons to push an Uchiha with, and he seemed to be doing a good job, or at least Yumi was really getting into her part. Suzuki seemed to be deliberately antagonizing her, but he had never really talked about his family before he left, and Naruto had formed the idea that he didn't really like his family much. Maybe Suzuki was just doing it because he was sick of her attitude. Ryu, is Haru going to need any more treatment before we all get back? Hinata asked. I don't think so, Haku shook his head. Niji had been brought his breakfast in his room, where he had been forbidden to move by Haku. He didn't seem happy, but he had long ago learned to do what medics said. Tsunade and Sakura were both violent, Hinata was simply unyielding, and Haku would force you into unconsciousness. He had grumbled and complained about being forced to sit in bed listening to Inari tell him he was going to die, but that didn't cut it as an excuse. Good, I didn't want any more of you staying here than absolutely necessary. After all, you kids are now my primary workforce, Tajuna said, trying to sound cheerful, but the reality of the situation sobered him up before he could even begin to laugh at his own joke. The man was stressed. His bad jokes, his forced cheerfulness all pointed to it. Well, who wouldn't? He was the only man standing up to the most powerful businessman in the region, and the only things he had on his side were some ninja that couldn't really be trusted and a few stray kids that were working for food. Let's start, Sakura grumbled, I hate waiting for things. As long as he doesn't have to be anywhere near me, Sai said, pointing at Kimimaro, I'm worried he might make something explode. Shut up before I impale you, Kimimaro muttered. Well, Naruto said, getting up from the table, before we go I have to go take dash. No one wants to hear it. Sakura cut in. Some time out, Naruto finished, what did ya think I was going to say? Who knows, coming from you, Suzuki muttered, and yes, ladies, he's still single. Hinata blushed a little. I know, Sakura said, and he's likely to remain so for a while. Hinata's blush deepened, but she was smiling slightly. Yeah, make fun. Naruto said in mock anger, you'll regret it one day. He left the room and walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. There was a window in that room, which made it perfect for what he was going to do. That bridge was getting pretty close to being done, and Gato was going to start playing dirty. Someone had to watch the house all the time, and since they couldn't just heal Niji and have him pretend to still be injured, blast Tsunami, she knew too much about that, someone would have to stick around. The only choice was the one person who had a power that would allow him to be in two places at the same time. Him. Naruto put his hands together and whispered, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There was a small puff of smoke, and there were suddenly two Narutos looking at each other. Why do I have to be the one to work on the bridge? The clone complained. Because if we run into an enemy, one punch will make you disappear, and I might not get there in time, Naruto said. This brought talking to yourself to a whole new level. Alright, fine, the clone said, sounding unhappy, but this stinks, you know that. Naruto shrugged, someone's gotta do it, and you're a clone, so deal with it. Naruto didn't bother to wait to hear his double's response. He knew from experience that it was almost impossible to convince his Kage Bushin of anything. He just dished out orders, and they knew better than to disobey. Naruto would just dispel it. He climbed out the window and jumped to the ground. There was no one around, and Naruto had the urge to wait until everyone was gone and just slack off. He shook it off and waited for them to leave. Hopefully, it would be soon. About 15 minutes later, the door opened and everybody left. Kiba and Shino went in the direction that Haku had said he was going to pick herbs in, and everyone else went with Tabuza towards the bridge. His clone was acting like nothing was going on, but from the look of Hinata, she already knew, good, she would manage to tell Sakura, and the word would spread around. That way there would be no awkward moment explaining why Taki had disappeared in a puff of smoke when someone hit him. Naruto waited for a while and took off into the woods, in a different direction to Shino or Kiba. It was probably going to be a very boring day. Naruto had been basically doing nothing most of the day, and was starting to feel slightly guilty for leaving everyone with all the work while he did nothing more than admire the landscape around Tajuna and Tsunami's house. He had thought that Gato was going to do something smart, but it looked like he had overestimated him. Gato appeared to be just as stupid as his name sounded. If it were Naruto, he would have sent someone to do something to Tsunami and her son to break Tajuna's spirit. Gato wasn't someone who played fair, therefore he must simply not have thought of it. How had he made it as a crime lord? Naruto had been circling the property for a while, steering clear of where Kiba or Shino were, but he hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. Other than the usual wildlife, there was nothing in the forest. Naruto supposed he should be pleased, but really he was just annoyed, and he was going to have to deal with the others being annoyed that he had just run off on work. Maybe he could make something up? Naruto kept going from tree to tree, but he wasn't looking quite as hard. He almost had a fit when he saw the two ninja almost right in front of him. They were both older men, and were wearing full ninja gear. Their faces were covered by breathing masks. They hadn't seemed to notice Naruto. Actually, they seemed far too interested in their own conversation to notice much of anything. "This is our chance to redeem ourselves," the first one said. "But Gato-san doesn't know we're here," the other one said. "Are you sure that he'll be pleased?" "Why wouldn't he be?" the first one asked. "While his stupid mercenaries attack the workers, we're going to attack the bridge builder's heart. It'll completely save our reputation." "What about those Konoha-nin?" the second one asked. "They'll regret that they ever crossed the demon brothers." "You know, I never quite got Kiri's thing with demons," Naruto cut in, landing on a branch in front of them. "I mean, they're not the kind of role models I ever wanted." "Who the heck are you?" the second one asked. "Nobody," Naruto said lightly, "just some kid that was hired to keep you from doing what you're about to do." From what Naruto could see of the eyes, he was smiling. "Some kid was hired to stop us," the first said. "Too bad for you," the second snarled. The first made a move to look like he was going to reach behind him, but with a twitch of his hand, he threw one of the long chained claw that was attached to his hand at Naruto. Naruto jumped out of the way and barely missed being impaled. As it was, the branch that he was standing on was torn off. In midair, Naruto took out 3 kunai and threw them, but not before making the succession of seals. "Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu!" Naruto yelled. The kunai that Naruto had thrown multiple into about 50, making the demon brothers jump out of the way of the barrage of kunai. Both of them tried to send out their clawed hands at him again, but they missed. Naruto could see that the claws looked like they had been thoroughly marinated in poison, and he had no wish to test out just how much the Kyuubi wanted to live. "You guys need to use a different technique," Naruto said. "Why?" the second one asked. "It seems to be working just fine." The last word was accompanied by the chained claw. Naruto didn't jump this time. He moved a little so that the chain soared past him. Naruto grabbed the chain and yanked hard. The second demon brother let out a surprised noise that the kid could do that, but the force of the chain, along with Naruto's help, caused him to overbalance and made him actually fall into his brother, who was right next to him. Both of them fell off of the tree branch they were on, and hit the ground with a loud thud. They jumped out just as fast and looked around for their opponent. Naruto jumped to the ground and straightened. He didn't have any weapons in his hands, but he was tense and looked like he was about to charge. "You'll have to do better than that," the older one said with a sneer. "All right," Naruto said with a grin. He straightened and his hands fell into the one seal needed. "Hibaku Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." For the first time they noticed that they were standing in a circle that had been made up of Naruto's Shuriken Kage Bushin. "Boom," Naruto whispered. There was a blast that caused Naruto's ears to ring for a moment, and disorient him. The smoke from the blast cleared. Thankfully it wasn't enough to get any unwanted attention, leaving a large, fairly deep hole. Naruto walked to the edge and looked around for the demon brothers. That attack shouldn't have killed them. It was a trap that was more designed to create a hole deep enough and to injure them enough for them not to be able to get away easily. Naruto was more interested in interrogating them for information on Gato's plans than really killing them. His eyes fell on the forms of the two brothers. One had fallen at an odd angle and looked like he had broken his leg, and the other had managed to fall in a way that twisted his arm in a way that it wasn't meant to twist. "How did you guys escape from the Konoha Inn?" Naruto asked curiously. "I mean, you guys stink, but hey, I don't care." "So, you guys want to get out of there, right?" Both brothers were silent. "If you answer my questions, I'll allow you to leave," Naruto said with a grin. "I think not." The first one said quietly, "Our dignity as Kirinin would never allow such a thing." "Yes, Aniki." The second put in, "It is a ninja's duty to never allow themselves to be interrogated." Naruto's eyes widened. "Oh crap," he muttered, jumping down, but not in time to stop them from biting down hard on something. The demon brothers' eyes rolled back into their heads and they collapsed completely, twitching slightly. Naruto landed and began swearing fluently. He turned one of them over, but the twitching had already started to fade away. Naruto pulled off the mask and wrenched the mouth open to see a small pill that they both probably had in their mouths just for such an occasion. They were dead in 1 minute. Naruto sighed and jumped out of the hole. Now he had to cover this mess up before Kakashi or one of the genin saw it. The looks that the others were giving him told Naruto just what everyone thought of his running out and leaving them to do all the work, even though he did leave a cage bunshin. Sakura was making a frequent habit of cracking her knuckles as often as she could without making people look at her. Gaara was looking a little exasperated and rolled his eyes when Naruto looked at him. Sai was smiling his fake smile, which, when aimed at him or any other member of Hakumei, usually meant trouble. Hinata was glancing at him every so often. It was hard to tell what she was thinking, but it probably wasn't good. Niji's gaze was much easier to read, "Just you wait till we're alone." Kimimaro was cracking the bones his in hands, and would occasionally smile up at Naruto. Naruto wasn't reassured. Haku was the only one who didn't look mad, he just looked a little hurt, but Naruto would explain everything, he'd have to. Sasuke was very quiet, which was all Naruto needed to see. When he was very quiet, it meant that he was brooding and plotting, and Arashi no Sasuke was probably the most vengeful person Naruto would ever meet. Once again, they were sitting at the kitchen table. This time even Inari was there, looking sulky. His mother had probably told him to be polite to his guests. Kiba was complaining about boring training, Shino looked like he was playing with a bug on his finger, Yumi was eating her meal wordlessly and Kakashi was talking to Tajuna about the best ways to prevent burglars. "Did anything happen today?" Tsunami asked, as she set some more food on the table. "Someone," Sai said, looking at Kimimaro, "managed to almost kill me with a flying socket wrench." "For the last time, it wasn't my fault," Kimimaro grumbled, "how was I supposed to know it would do that?" Sai shrugged, "Maybe you could read the instructions." "Humph. How far are you along, Kiba-kun, Shino-kun?" Tsunami asked again, trying to get a conversation going. "I'm almost at the top of the tree," Kiba said with a smirk. "I'm done," Shino said softly. "You fell off," Kiba pointed out. "At the beginning because you fell on me," Shino said in the same monotone voice. "I told you not to mention that." Kiba snarled, "Just you wait till Akamaru and I save your sorry hide in real battle, Shino. Once Danzusama lets us go to war dash." "Alright you two, it's time for us to get to sleep," Kakashi said, "we have a long day tomorrow, and Kiba, you still have training." "Ah, crud," Kiba grumbled. "Good night all," Kakashi said. "You know, you're not my mom," Kiba growled. "No, I'm your commander," Kakashi agreed, "now, go to bed." Kiba gave him a look of intense anger, but did as he was told. Shino followed without a word. "I'm going to have to ask you too, Yumi-chan," Kakashi said. "Just because you're not training doesn't mean you get extra privileges." "Hi, sensei," she said in a neutral tone, leaving the room. "Is everything alright?" Tsunami asked. Kakashi smiled, "Everything's fine, they just need to rest." "I noticed that Kiba was looking pretty tired earlier, so I thought it might be a good idea for him to have some extra sleep." Kimimaro snickered a little. "I take it you kids played a little joke on him?" Kakashi asked suddenly, but smiled a little. "Don't worry, I'm not mad, but you should have a little more respect for them. They may be your age or even younger, but they've been trained to protect you, and if they had to, they'd die for you. Somehow Naruto doubted that Yumi would die to save Sasuke. Well, Kiba needs someone to pop his ego for him, Naruto said, looking unconcerned, but knowing that his response was probably important. Yeah, Sakura agreed, if someone doesn't, he'll have trouble going through the doors. Especially when he starts winning battles. Yeah, the enemy shinobi will have an easy target, Sai chipped in. You make me sick. All eyes turned to face the speaker. Inari had stood up, his hands balled into fists, and his teeth clenched. You all make me so sick. He yelled and pointed at Naruto, especially you. You laugh and make jokes and don't know anything about suffering. You're all going to die, you know that. Geto's got his mercenaries and he'll kill you like he's killed everyone else. So we should just give up? Naruto asked calmly. So you're saying that when you're faced with someone who might win you should just belly up because you might just die? That's just what I'm talking about. Inari was screaming, you're so stupid. You don't understand anything. You've never had anything bad happen to you. Shut up, before I make you brat, Naruto hissed, and don't talk about things that you don't know anything about. You know something, brat, I'm not afraid of dying, and if I have a choice of being like you and dying, I'll shake hands with the Shinigami. I'm not going to be the protagonist of my own tragedy. You don't know how bad life is. Inari yelled. Oh look, Naruto said, looking at his friends, Inari's had some rough times so now he's going to get on a soapbox and preach to the world. But yeah, wanna know something? The world really doesn't care what you've been through. There's no one alive who's never known suffering or sadness, and there is always someone out there with a bigger sob story than yours. I'm really sorry about your dad and all, but maybe you should think about someone other than yourself. Your mom and grandpa are fighting just to keep you alive and give you a future, and what are you doing? Whining about how no one knows what you've been through. What about your mom? She loved him, yeah no, and she misses him too. So shut up and stop being such a baby. Naruto didn't know what came over him, he had yelled it and run outside without thinking. It had been a long time since he'd even thought of the past, but all this kid did was remind him of his and everyone's pain. He saw Sakura curled in on herself sobbing, trying to hide her forehead, Sasuke pushing himself to the limit only to have his parents tell him that one day he might be almost as good as his brother, Kimimaro sitting in a dark cell staring at the walls, Haku walking through the snow away from his ruined house and the father he had murdered, Sai, nothing more than an emotionless shell, doing the bidding of a warlord, Gaara watching the other children running away from him in abject terror and clutching his head in horror at the things the monster inside of him wanted him to do, Hinata sobbing in frustration as she mistook another step and looked into the harsh eyes of her father, Niji staring at the grave of his father who had been a scapegoat to the main house, and himself sitting alone in his apartment, vaguely wondering what his parents' names were and if they were dead or just didn't want him. Naruto punched a tree in frustration. He hadn't been able to keep himself under control. He was sure there was a scene going on back at the house, but he didn't want to come back. Besides, if a normal kid had been that angry they would have gone off and sulked, so he would wait until the coast was clear and go back. He's wrong, Inari muttered to himself, he's completely wrong. Hello, Inari-kun, a soft voice said. Inari turned around to see the red-headed guy with the dark circles, Shinta, standing behind him. Inari had climbed up on the roof to have some privacy and to think. Also, he wanted to know just when that Taki guy would come back. What do you know? Inari asked. Well, other than the fact that Taki never had a family, practically everyone in the place where he grew up hated him, and he probably wasn't even missed when he left. Nothing much, Shinta said, you'll have to talk to Ryu if you want to talk to someone who had a family and lost it, but then again, his father murdered his mother and then tried to kill him, so I guess it's not really that similar. That's not true, Inari said, you're lying. Unfortunately no, I'm not, Shinta said, sitting down next to Inari, everyone in our little group has a very sad story behind them. In a way, we are throwaway kids. No one wanted us, so we came together. Why do you keep fighting? Inari muttered, isn't it easier just to give up? It may be, but none of us want to, Shinta smiled a little. We all learned that it's better for us all to look to the future and not look back. The past is real, and shouldn't be forgotten, but nor should it be dwelt on to the point of us not being able to move on. I'm sure Kaizo-san would have wanted you to keep smiling, and never to let anything get you down. Inari didn't know what to say to that. Besides, you have your mother and grandfather, Shinta said, and they love you very, very much. Shinta stood up and looked up at the moon. Just think about what I said, and don't be too mad at Taki. He's trying to help, but sometimes doesn't know how to, other than to hit someone until they see sense. In a moment Shinta was gone, and Inari was left with his own thoughts. Chapter 11, Part 2, Betrayal. The rest of the week passed uneventfully. Tsunami and Tajuna never brought up the events of the night that Naruto had yelled at Inari. They seemed to think that it was better not to pry into the problems of other people. Naruto had to admit, he was glad he didn't have to explain. Inari himself was avoiding Naruto. Whenever they would be in the same room by accident, Inari would leave as soon as possible. He didn't eat with the family again while Naruto was there, despite the frequent requests of his mother. Naruto once offered to eat in another room, but Tsunami wouldn't hear of it. She seemed to think that the two of them needed to talk to one another for this argument to end. After the attack of the Demon Brothers, there were no other unwanted guests who tried to call on the family. Naruto hadn't done anything to the bodies to scare intruders off, since that would be too noticeable, but Gato didn't seem interested in attacking the house. Naruto still patrolled, and after he had managed to explain to his friends, they admitted that it was a good reason and that Naruto wasn't just skipping out of work. The fact was, Naruto was the only one who could do the job, no matter how much the others didn't like it. Kakashi and his team continued to do their job, and the messenger hawk continued to arrive. Naruto would have loved to have intercepted it, but he had a feeling that Kakashi would know. The man was still asking questions about them every so often, not nosy enough to put Naruto on his guard, but too interested to put him at ease. Shino too continued to be a bit unnerving. Shino didn't seem to have anything against Hakumei, but he would make observations that really made everyone nervous. Yumi and Sasuke officially hated one another. She would have loved nothing more than to parade around Konoha with his head on a stick, and he had admitted to having way too much fun antagonizing her. The only good thing about this was that it kept her from noticing anything about the civvies. Naruto had a good hunch that she wouldn't just make statements. Easily the least threat was Kiba. He had no idea what was going on. They would have known too, his arrogance was matched only by his mouth. The bridge continued at a very slow pace, mostly since the men that had been hired kept on quitting. It was basically only Hakumei working on anything now, and they were inexperienced and their work was slower than it would have been. Tajuna didn't seem upset by how slow they were moving, actually, he seemed rather impressed they had managed to learn so much. Accidents weren't happening the way they had been at first, which was a good thing since Niji still was supposed to have fully recovered. The only problem was the Tajuna had started waking them up at dawn to get to work, even before him. In return, he promised to feed them for an extra few weeks when the bridge was done. It was on one morning like that that Naruto woke up and looked out the window. He shook the rest of the guys awake, and then stuck his head into the girls' room and asked if they were up. It was a little before dawn, and still very dark. Naruto didn't turn on any lights though, or even light a candle. This was a meeting that Naruto would have preferred that no one overhear. Niji, Hinata, Naruto said, when they had all assembled, are they all asleep? Both had activated the Byakugen and nodded. I don't see any sign of them waking up either, Niji said. Yumi's Churka signature is, rather strange, but it is her, Hinata said. She's rude, so she's going to be weird, Sasuke said. Hinata gave him a troubled look, but didn't say anything else. Are you sure about Kakashi and Shino? Naruto pressed. Shino's so obvious, it hurts. Everyone in his family is easy to see since the bugs in his body behave in a certain way when he's asleep. Trust me, Niji said. Kakashi-san is about as asleep as a former Umbu can be, Hinata added. Okay good, Naruto nodded, I really don't want this to be overhead. This is exactly 1 week since Kakashi wounded Zabuza. I think it's time for us to go over the plan. The others leaned forwards. Outside, the moon had begun to set and stars were starting to go out. Somewhere, a man who had tried to kill the Mizukage prepared for a battle that deep down, he thought would be his last. Kakashi woke up at the usual time with a vague feeling of unease. For a moment he had to recollect his thoughts, but then the date came to him. This was the day he had hoped would never come. It was odd how clear the day was. He would have rather it had been dark and cloudy so that the sun wouldn't have to see what was to happen. For Kakashi, it was the last time he would be able to look at the sky directly. "What would you have done, sensei, Rin, Obito?" Kakashi asked the sky. In an instant those faces all flashed back to him, all smiling. Those had been happy days. If only Kakashi had truly understood the privilege he had had, but that didn't matter anymore. Kakashi sent one final look outside, looking for a sign of the messenger hawk. There was nothing. Not that Kakashi actually had expected to see anything. Missions seldom changed once they had been given to a ninja. He had briefed everyone on the mission one final time last night. Yumi had seemed pleased with the orders, Kiba was ready and willing to follow any orders given to him, but Shino had been silent other than saying that if that was what the mission was, he would complete it to the best of his abilities. The team probably would go far. They were obedient, ready to improvise when necessary, and completely loyal to Danzu. Kakashi sat in his room for a while, thinking, but finally, when he felt he had probably pushed the limits of Tajuna's patience, he ambled down the stairs in a laid-back way that showed nothing of his real thoughts. Tsunami was serving breakfast again, and it looked like Inari wouldn't be joining them. The genin were all assembled, looking fresh, young, and completely ignorant of battle or what battle was really like. "Ohio, Kakashi-sensei," Shino greeted, bowing a little. "Ohio, everyone," Kakashi said lightly. "You're late," Kiba complained. "Well, you see, I was going downstairs and then I found out that a baby bird had flown in and had broken its wing, and so..." Kakashi began. "Lies," Kiba accused. Yumi commented. Shino said nothing. "Well, this is the first time we've all been able to watch the client together," Kakashi said happily. Maybe we'll get to see some action." Kiba said hopefully. "I hope not," Shino said, offering his actual opinion for a change. "I don't think we're prepared to face a Jonin-level opponent." "Well, chances are that Zabuza really was dead, and even if he isn't, I'll be the one to fight him like last time," Kakashi said. "You three stay back and protect Tajuna-san." "Well, it's about time for us to meet, Taki and the others at the bridge," Tajuna told them, taking a swig of sake. He seemed to have started drinking rather early, Kakashi noted. "It probably had something to do with nerves, we'd better get started." "Come back soon," Tsunami said with a smile to her father. "Say goodbye to Inari for me," Tajuna had never requested that before. Tsunami's eyes widened just for a moment, but her smile never faltered. "I will. We'll see you tonight. I'm making your favorite." "I'm looking forward to it," Tajuna said, taking another swig of sake. "We're probably not going to be coming back tonight," Kakashi told them both. "Since the bridge will be completed today, there's no reason for us to hang around anymore. Thank you for your hospitality." "No, thank you for taking such good care of my father," Tsunami bowed a little. "You've restored my faith in Konoha." Kiba was about to open his mouth, but Shino stepped hard on his foot, making him turn and glare at him, but forget what he was about to say. Kakashi led the way to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. It really was a beautiful day. The sky was clear blue, the birds were singing, and it felt like nothing wrong could ever happen on such a perfect day. Kiba ran a little ahead of everyone else, Akamaru on his head, Yumi brought up the rear, looking bored, and Shino walked beside Kakashi without any expression on his face. "If Zabuza is dead, what will happen?" Shino asked softly. "The mission will proceed as planned," Kakashi told him. "Hi, Kakashi-sensei," Shino replied in a neutral voice. The two continued walking, listening to Tajuna tell Kiba about some of the more interesting things about Wave's past. Kiba actually seemed interested and was sometimes asking questions. Yumi walked in silence, her dark eyes watching every move that Kakashi made. So far, he had behaved as a proper sensei despite his somewhat terminal lateness and his apathetic attitude. Perhaps her being placed on his team had been an overreaction after all. Then again, it was always difficult to tell. They had thought Itaka was loyal once, and he had betrayed Konoha. How could they trust Kakashi so easily? Yumi would wait and see. She was patient. Kakashi saw the form of the bridge coming. There didn't seem to be anything different about it, but the second that he had walked into it, he knew that there was something wrong. Where are the civvies? Kiba asked, looking around. I smell blood. Mist began to form around them and Kakashi sensed the presence of Zabuza in front of them. That's because I killed the kids working on the bridge, a cold voice said through the mist. So, I was right, you didn't die, Kakashi said as he began to distinguish the form of the missing nin. He was wearing the same armor he had seen him in last, and most of his face was still covered. The monstrous sword that he wielded was in his hands, and he looked like he hadn't ever been wounded. Behind him, there was a figure of someone standing, but Kakashi couldn't quite distinguish who it was. Kakashi pulled up his Hitai-8, revealing Obito's present. You're lucky, Kakashi said, you're the first of my opponents to ever see this twice, but you won't see it a third time. Kakashi, you know you're no match for me, Zabuza drawled, just hand over the old man, I'll go about my business. I'll do better, Kakashi said. If you set me up with an appointment to see your boss, I'll help you. Tajuna, who had been behind the three genin, took a step back, as they all turned to him, their eyes dead. Well, this is a turn of events I hadn't expected. Zabuza said, from what Kakashi could see, he was smirking, I'll let you do the honors. Tajuna took another frightened step back. It looked like he wasn't going to be home for dinner after all. For a moment the faces of Tsunami and Inari flashed through his mind. He closed his eyes and waited. There was a rushing sound, and Tajuna braced himself. Kakashi took a step forward, but was stopped by a kunai thrown at his feet, and the wall of ice that surrounded Tajuna. That's as far as you go. Inari woke up late, after the ninja had left for the bridge. He hadn't wanted to talk to them all that much, and had been purposely sleeping in since they had come. He went downstairs to see his mother eating her breakfast, looking thoughtful and a little worried. Are they all gone? Inari asked. Yes, dear, his mother said, not looking up, your grandfather should be home by dinner. Are those ninja and those workers coming back? Inari asked. He really didn't want to see Taki ever again. The workers will be back for a few more meals, but the ninja shouldn't be coming back, his mother said, looking a little relieved. Kakashi-san was nice enough, but those children put me on edge. There was something unnatural about them, particularly the girl, Yumi-chan. Inari had to agree, the way that girl looked at people was kind of creepy. Even that Emi girl, who was probably the most violent person he'd ever met, acted like a normal 12-year-old. Why don't you go out and play, Inari? Tsunami said, there's nothing to do here, and you haven't been out in quite a while. Inari would have liked to object, but the worry that was on his mother's face made him stop. She really looked like she was thinking about something. Inari nodded mutely and ate his breakfast in silence. As he was cleaning his bowl, he thought he heard the sound of footsteps. That was strange, a part of him thought, they seldom had any visitors. The rest of Inari's thoughts were interrupted by someone slamming themselves against the front door, trying to break it down. Inari, get out! His mother yelled, shoving him towards the window over the kitchen sink, which overlooked the garden and had about 5 feet between it and the ground. But what about you? He asked, as he heard the door giving way under the weight. Don't worry about me. There was another shove, the feeling of being picked up, and Inari had fallen onto the ground in a heap. Find your grandfather, you'll be fine. Inari crouched outside the window and heard the door give way. There was a crash and then loud, pounding footsteps. They halted in the kitchen, and the silence that came with that seemed to last for a good 15 minutes. Put the knife down, sweetie, one gruff, leering voice said, it's not going to help you all that much. We'll just force it from you. Stay away from me and my family. Tsunami's voice was deadly cold. Just where is your brat anyways? A second, drawling voice asked. You won't find him. Tsunami's voice had a hint of triumph in it. He's gone. Well, that's too bad. The first voice was triumphant. Well, I guess we'll just have to focus on you, right? Yep, the second said, you're pretty hot too. I love our job. Inari's mind was racing. For a moment he saw his dad dying again, and part of his mind told him to run. The weak didn't have any way to fight against the strong. He had learned that already. Inari braced himself for a dash when he heard the words of Taki and Shinta again. Your mom and grandpa are fighting just to keep you alive and give you a future. I'm sure Kaizo-san would have wanted you to keep smiling, and never to let anything get you down. Besides, you have your mother and grandfather, and they love you very, very much. He remembered that his father had smiled at him before he had died. Inari had been so angry, not at Geto, but at his dad. Maybe Taki was right, maybe he had been being selfishly angry that his dad had thought about something else instead of what he, Inari, wanted. Maybe there really was such a thing as a hero in the world. Inari stood up and ran around to the front door, grabbing the first thing that came into his hands, a dirty-looking mop. He stepped over the remains of the door, and began to walk quietly across the hall. This was the most important thing that he was doing now. If he could sneak up on them, then Inari might be able to beat both of them before they knew what was happening. He edged up to the kitchen door and peeked around the corner. His mother was standing with her back to the sink, knife in hand, glaring at the two men with a kind of desperate fury that made Inari wonder just how far she would go to buy him time to run away. I swear if you take another step, I'll kill one of you, she hissed. Now, honey, the one closest to her, a large, beefy-looking man, said consolingly, this can be easy, or this can be hard. It's your choice, but either way, we're going to win. Just put the knife down, the second one, a short yet stocky man, agreed, it won't hurt, promise. Tsunami's eyes were like two pieces of steel and she raised her hands with the knife in them. Have it your way. The first one said, taking a step towards her. Inari swung the mop with all his might at the second man's head, causing a loud crack that sounded through what felt like the whole house and the second man to fall back a little bit, rubbing the sore spot where the mop had hit. The other whirled around to see what had happened. His eyes fell on Inari standing behind the man. Well, he said with a grin, it looks like we don't have to do any work after all. You stay away from my mother. Inari yelled, if you don't dash. You'll what, Gaki? The second man stood up, looking at him darkly, you'll hit me again with that mop? After all, it worked so well last time. Just give up, the first one coaxed, it'll be over soon, and I'll tell you what, I'll make it painless. What more can you ask for? You're weak, and the strong prey off the weak. Inari, run. Tsunami screamed. No. Inari yelled, I'm not going to run away, I'm going to be a hero like my dad. You're not going to win, cause even if you beat me up, I'll still fight you. Inari charged forwards, aiming a punch that he already knew would be blocked, hoping that somehow, something would happen that would prove that his father was right. Inari's fist connected, sending a wave of pain through him. He hadn't balled his fist right, but there was another sound of a fist connecting with flesh. Lesson 1 for being a cliché hero, always be a little late, it adds to the drama. A voice that Inari recognized as Taki said. What dash the first guy said, looking at his partner who was on the ground, clutching his gut. He looked up to see the blonde, whisker-faced boy grinning at him in a slightly feral way. He was in a fighter's crouch, and Inari suddenly had the feeling that Taki had seen his fair share of fights. I've been waiting for Geto to send more goons, Taki said, ever since the Demon Brothers showed up, but I thought he would send someone tougher. You got the jump on Shin, team, but not me. The first man was suddenly holding a knife and rushed at Taki. Inari felt like he was watching in slow motion as the man ran towards Taki, knife flashing. It seemed like Taki took forever as he seemed to just sidestep the knife and take another step until he was behind him. Then Taki's hands were at the man's neck, touching a point at it. The man's eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed. Inari stared at the figure of the man in shocked silence for a moment, and then the first thing that came to his head popped out of his mouth. You killed him. Taki leaned over and grabbed the man's wrist. Nope, he's just out cold, he said in an unconcerned way. I didn't think I'd gotten the point that would kill him, but sometimes I forget which is which. Could you two help me tie him and his friend up, they can tell you what's up. As if nothing out of the ordinary was happening and this was just another of his odd jobs, Taiki calmly tied both men up and dragged them into the center of the room. Inari helped him as best he could with trembling hands and an unsteady step. "Thank you, Taiki," Tsunami said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Taiki looked a little embarrassed and scratched the back of his head with one hand. "Hey, that's what you paid us to do, right? Keep all of you safe." "Actually, you only had to keep my father safe," Tsunami reminded him with a small smile. "Well, we try to keep the client, and everyone connected with them safe too. Standard Hakumei practice." Taiki laughed a little. "It's still going above and beyond your duty, and I'm very grateful," Tsunami said, laughing a little. "Mom, what's going on?" Inari was really getting confused. "What's Hakumei?" "So you're the one who took out the demon brothers and put all those traps around the house," the second man, who was still conscious, accused. "I'm with the group that did that, yeah," Taiki said with a smug look. "What's it to ya?" "That's impossible," the man said, angrily. "We saw all 9 of you leave the house." "Yep, you did," Taiki agreed. "Zabuza should have killed you," he continued. "So, I guess I'm a really solid ghost," Taiki said with a shrug. "Zabuza." Panic crossed Tsunami's face. "He's at the bridge." "Father. Your dad's going to be fine," Taiki said in a coaxing voice. Inari remembered the ninja talking about Zabuza. From what he had heard, he had been under Gato's orders, and very dangerous. That guy with the mask, Kakashi had said that he might be dead, but obviously he was still very much alive. "But, Grandpa has those ninja with him, doesn't he?" Inari asked. "Aren't they supposed to be tough?" "I don't know." Tsunami was looking more and more upset and frightened. "Inari," Taiki's voice had changed. It wasn't amused or laid back or annoyed or any of the other ways he had heard it before. It was serious and almost mature. "You need to get help and take care of your mom." What about you?" Inari asked. "I can't stick around here. Besides." Taiki didn't say anything more, but Inari had a feeling that whatever it was something important. "You're going to fight him, aren't you?" Inari asked. "Zabuza?" "Yep," Taiki said with a small grin. "Why?" Inari asked. "'Cause I'm going to protect everyone I can," Taiki said, dead serious, "and if I back down now, what's going to happen later? I'll never be a hero, but I'm going to be just as good as one. I made a promise a long time ago to someone, and I'm not going to go back on my word. I guess you could call that my Nindo." Inari had a moment to interpret those words before Taiki had run off, leaving him and his mother with 2 tied-up men. For a second, Inari thought that he heard something going pop outside, but shook it off. His ears were probably the only things popping. Now, he had to do something. Inari looked at his mop and looked around the kitchen until he found a bucket. It was full of water, but he dumped it out the window and picked it up so that it looked like a shield. He was ready for battle. It was time for Inari to act the way his father would have wanted. Kakashi stared at the figures that stood on the metal beams of the bridge about them. There were 9 people standing there, all of them were ninja, and they looked like they were some sort of team of rogue nin. They were all in a uniform, and all of them wore masks. The uniform was a simple black shirt and pants, along with the tolas, combat sandals that were the traditional footwear for ninja, and fingerless gloves. Any skin was hidden by armored bandages, but the most distinguishing thing about the uniform was the haori that each of them was wearing. They were white with a pattern of blue flames that seemed to be burning the bottom edges up. Kakashi knew that it had been designed to resemble the yondames. The other most distinguishing trait was the mask that each of them wore. They were all plain and white, with slitted eye holes, much like a hunter nin's, and on the forehead of each mask was a different kanji: Shippuya, Arashi, Nishoku, Jeshoku, Hara, Raisin, Shinen, Haka, and Sabaku. They were all looking at the group of ninja, and Kakashi, with the Sharingan, could see one thing about his people. They were no pushovers. "Who are those freaks?" Kiba asked with a sneer. "They look kinda weak, don't they?" "Stand down, Kiba," Kakashi ordered. "Those are true ninja." He looked at the group. "What do you want?" "We have been hired to protect Tajuna-san from all threats," the one with the mark Jeshoku said. From the sound of it, it was a woman. "Please leave, and there will be no trouble, the one marked Shinen said. Unfortunately, that's impossible, Kakashi said. So, let's get this started, Zabuza said with a bit of impatience. My Kubikari Hoko hasn't had much blood lately anyways, and you guys look good enough to entertain me for a while. The one marked Shibuya looked around at the other figures. Shinen, you keep the genin busy. Raisin, Jeshoku, Nishoku, protect Tajuna-san, your attacks will damage the bridge if you're not careful. Remember that if someone attempts to harm Tajuna-san. Arashi, Haka, keep Mamakai Zabuza busy. Hara, make sure that assistant is dealt with. Sabaku and I will fight Hatake Kakashi. Hi. 8 voices responded and all figures jumped away from where they were. Shinen appeared in front of the genin for a split second, his head's already making a series of patterns. Get him! Kiba yelled, charging forwards. Kokwangayo no Jutsu, Shinen said calmly. Kiba gasped as a cloud of total darkness washed over him. He took a deep breath, but somehow, even his sense of smell was being blocked off. Akamera whined a little. I can't smell anything, he said, sounding very upset. Shino. Kiba called out, Yumi. I'm here, Shino's voice said a little to Kiba's left, he's trapped me in the genjutsu as well. Yumi, can you hear us? Yes, Yumi's calm voice cut through the darkness to Kiba's right, I'm trying to break it, but it's surprisingly powerful. And Kiba said. The rest of his sentence was stopped by the feeling of something slimy wrapping around his body. What's that? He yelled. I don't know, Yumi's voice responded, but it's got me too. You're all very lucky that I'm not going to kill you, a pleasant voice said, through the darkness, you're just going to sit there and wait for the battle to end. Yumi's light laughter cut through the darkness and there was a sound of something snapping. Even if I can't see, I can still fight you, she said calmly. Sasuke landed in front of Zabuza and felt Kimimaro land behind him. From what Sasuke could see of the missing nin's face, he looked a little disappointed. I was hoping to fight with all of you, he admitted, those kids were just too easy to kill. Sasuke smirked under his mask. It was amazing just what Sakura's genjutsu was able to do. She really had talent when she wanted to use it, which wasn't all that often. Even now, Sakura had used a basic one that made them all appear a little taller and their voices sound a little different. They didn't really want to be recognized. Sorry, but you're just going to have to deal with us, Sasuke said with a smirk. I've always wondered how I'd do against an opponent of your famed power, and now I get to see. You mean we get to see, Kimimaro said, his voice unreadable. Humph, Sasuke could tell Zabuza was smirking, it looks like I'll be able to have some fun after all. You kids just might be cut out to be ninja, if you live. Well, there's only one way to find out, Sasuke said. You're shivering. Zabuza said, satisfaction in his voice. Yes, I am, with excitement. Sasuke dashed forwards. Finally, he was in a true fight against a real opponent. It was time to see just how far he had come from the child who had barely been able to light a candle with his attacks. Isaribi knew that Zabuza would kill those people who had interfered with his work. It wasn't that she enjoyed the thought, it was simply that Zabuza was not one to allow something like some local group of hero wannabes to cause him any real trouble. He had had no problem with slaughtering the kids who had been on the bridge. Deep down, Isaribi felt sympathy for them all, particularly Haku. They had never even known what hit them, and they had simply been in the wrong place at the right time. There was a possibility that they were alive, but not too good of one. A figure stepped out of the mist, looking at her. It was one of the attackers, and the kanji on his forehead read Hara. I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to help Zabuza this time. The voice of the figure was gentle and somehow familiar, but for the life of her, Isaribi couldn't place it. There's nothing you can do to stop me, Isaribi said calmly, I am not as defenseless as I appear. Zabuza would only travel with someone who was powerful, the man agreed, but still, I can't let you. Arashi and Haka are depending on me. Then try, Isaribi challenged. She charged forwards. Her speed was unmatched by any of the opponents that she had faced, and once she was within striking range, it would be too late for the man. She would make both of them fall into the water and drown him. She sent a kick, waiting for the feeling of connection, but none came. The man was simply and suddenly gone. She sensed his presence behind her and attempted a roundhouse kick. She was shocked to see him disappear right in front of her eyes. Just as suddenly, he was a few feet in front of her with his hands forming one seal. "Hihutsu, Makyu Hyushao," she heard him say. The effect was almost instantaneous. Isaribi was surrounded by what looked like mirrors of solid ice that were floating slightly above the ground. Slowly, she reached out one hand and touched one. It was solid and so cold it almost burned. Isaribi dashed forwards, but something shoved her back into the center of the dome of mirrors. "You can't get out," the man's voice said as he appeared in all of the mirrors, "not until I let you out. I don't want to hurt you, but if you insist on fighting, I will." Isaribi formed the pattern of hand signs that Zabuza had taught her to make sure that she never completely had to rely on her little ability. "Suten, Mizu Bakuden," she said. A ball of water formed itself from the air inside the dome of mirrors and began to steam as bubbles started to come from the bottom up. The ball of boiling water launched itself at one of the mirrors and hit it directly. The second that the water touched the mirrors, it froze. "How?" Isaribi asked. "That attack should have melted it." "My Kekii Genkai creates ice," the man said. "All you did was give me water that I turned into ice to strengthen the mirror. Even if you had used a Katon Jutsu, the effect would have been the same. You can't escape. What do you want?" Isaribi asked. "If you want to kill me, just do it." "But I don't," Hara said, shaking his head. "That's the last thing I want to do. Shibuya ordered that I keep you from helping Zabuza, and that's what I've done." The masked man held up one hand. In it there were 5 senbon. "Please don't try to get out, I don't want to have to attack you." Tajuna found himself staring at the backs of 3 people, 2 of them were obviously women. They were all in defensive positions and were watching the battles that were beginning carefully. "I wish that we had been able to fight," one of the girls sighed. Shibuya had a good point though, the only male in the group said. "Our attacks will probably damage the bridge." "That doesn't make it easier," the other complained. "True, but I guess we can't blame him," the first girl admitted. "But we can hope that someone tries to attack Tajuna-san," the man said. "I've been wanting to see how well I did against a Jonin too." "That probably makes all of us, but someone must protect the client, and with all of those opponents, it makes sense to have the greatest number of people protecting the client," the second girl said. "You're too nice to Shibuya, Jeshoku," the boy grumbled. Tajuna wasn't sure whether to be reassured by their confidence or worried that they might just decide to leave their posts and join the battle. They sure looked like they were thinking of that possibility, and he wasn't sure if he could trust them. After all, one group had already betrayed him. What was so different about this one? He hoped that the battle would be short. After all, with the shifting alliances and the sudden appearances, he may find himself in a very bad position if they all decided to join Gato's payroll. Kakashi looked at the figure who had appeared in front of him. The other ones, including Sabaku, who was supposed to be fighting him, were gone. "Is it too much to ask to know who I'm fighting?" Kakashi asked. "You apparently know me, so it's only right." "I am Shibuya, leader of Hakumei," the figure said. Hakumei. That was strange. A group this well organized should have been known about in Konoha. They knew about most of the teams of mercenaries, even those who weren't all that powerful, and this group didn't give that impression. Actually, when he looked at this group, only one other team of ninja came to mind, Akatsuki, a band of missing nin and criminals. They were secretive, and information about them was difficult to find. It was only with the help of the Toadsunin, Jiraiya, that they even knew that such an organization even existed at all. Now, there was a new group that he knew nothing about, with members of an unknown number and an unknown level of skill. They were confident though, and probably just as powerful as he assumed them to be. They were smart too, none of them actually fighting a Jonin one-on-one. Shinen appeared to have already made his team unable to fight, and whatever help Zabuza had, was probably just as unable. They had already taken out any backup, and were preparing to attack. "I see that's the only answer that you're going to give me right now," Kakashi sighed. "Well, I guess I'll find out more about you as we fight." Shibuya seemed to have prepared himself, but he wasn't attacking, and the Sharingan didn't foresee an attack in the near future. He was waiting for Kakashi to attack. Kakashi wasn't quite sure if he liked that confidence. The one who attacked first had the greatest advantage, but something about the way he was waiting made Kakashi think that Shibuya was planning something. Too bad there wasn't anything he could do but jump into that trap. Even if he tried to go after Tajuna, Shibuya would come after him, and he still had those three to worry about. He had no backup in this. "You've used the tactic of divide and conquer well, I have to admit that," Kakashi said. "I'm flattered that you think so," Shibuya replied. "I'm not going to hold back on you," Kakashi said, "I respect you too much." He disappeared and reappeared aiming a kick at Shibuya from the left side. Shibuya barely had time to block as the kick made him fall back a few feet. Shibuya didn't wait for another attack. His hands were together in the single seal he needed. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he said. 10 Bunshin appeared and surrounded Kakashi, who didn't have time to wonder just how it was that this person had summoned 10 clones and was still standing. All of them attacked in unison, throwing a succession of kunao as well as a succession of kicks, punches, and other assorted attacks that Kakashi couldn't place the style of. This was really getting too dangerous for him to play around. The Sharingan allowed him to see what Shibuya was going to do, but there were so many of them that it was hard to keep track of all of them. When he dispelled one, another took its place, and the attacks gave him little time to form the seals he needed to win. It seemed that was Shibuya's strategy. Shibuya seemed to know that he couldn't actually beat Kakashi, and that didn't seem to even be what he was after anyway. From what Kakashi could see, Shibuya was buying time for something. There was 1 second between the dispelling of one clone and the formation of another that Kakashi was able to take advantage of. He jumped backwards and as he moved, made a series of signs. "Suten, Daibakufu no Jutsu," he said. One of the Shippus was not engaging in battle, and while the Sharingan was not about to tell a Kage Bunshin from the original, Kakashi was smart enough to know that if he could make 10 of himself to fight an enemy, he would stay out of battle, and that was the Shibuya that he was going to aim for. From the water under the bridge, a large, swirling pillar of water shot up, aiming straight for the Shibuya who was outside the battle and engulfing him. For a second, the clones seemed to stop, but then he heard it. There was a poofing sound, and the Shibuya went up in a cloud of smoke. "Wrong one!" 10 voices called out, and the attacks began anew. Where was the real Shibuya? He was blocking a long succession of kicks when he felt himself step into something soft. Managing to force Shibuya back for a moment, for a split second he looked down to make sure that he hadn't stepped in some kind of Doton Jutsu that was meant to slow him down. Sand? His eyes scanned the area to see that there was sand that had somehow gotten into a circle around where he and Shibuya were fighting. "Now!" Shibuya yelled. Sabaku, who had disappeared throughout the entire battle, seemed to materialize out of the sand. One hand was raised and before Kakashi could really understand what was happening, everything became pitch black. Kakashi took out a small stick in his vest and cracked it. It lit up and cast a faint light around him. In the greenish glow that the light stick emitted, Kakashi could see that he was in a dome that looked like it was made entirely of sand that was about 20 feet in diameter and at least 20 feet high. Shibuya was standing at the opposite end of the dome. "Well, you've sure gone through a lot of work to make sure that we're not going to be seen," Kakashi said. Shibuya said nothing. "Why don't you take off your mask, Taiki, or should I say, Naruto-kun?" Chapter 12, Part 2, The Battle for the Bridge. Sasuke had already learned the one major advantage that swordsmen had: they had a longer reach than he did, and he had to constantly be on the defensive. Zabuza was faster with that sword than Sasuke had anticipated, judging on the size and probable weight of it. His movements were both hard to read and unexpected, and Sasuke was forced to stay back and use his longer range attacks. The problem with them was they were easy to read and anticipate where they were going. Zabuza had no trouble dodging. Kimimaro was having similar problems. He used his Teshi Senden as much as he could while dodging attacks. He was unable to use most of his truly powerful attacks. Zabuza actually seemed to be enjoying himself. From what Sasuke could see from the man's face, he was grinning. Sasuke had the feeling that he was playing with them a little. For one thing, he hadn't used any real jutsu yet. Sasuke jumped up and formed an attack. Katon, Housenka. he called. A large amount of small fireballs shot out of where Sasuke's mouth was, even though it was covered by a mask. Sujin Hiki, Zabuza said as a large barrier of water rose up in a circle around him. The fireballs hit the shield and went out, but the kunao that had been hidden in them continued. Zabuza lifted his sword to deflect the barrage of kunao. He didn't notice Kimimaro right behind him. Tsubaki no mai! Kimimaro yelled, a sword made entirely out of bone in his hands. Kimimaro struck out, only to meet the steel of Zabuza's sword, flipped back and landed on his feet out of range and ready to continue. You kids aren't half bad. Zabuza admitted, I'm starting to enjoy myself. Sasuke didn't say a thing, he just dashed forwards in a zigzag pattern. He had to get closer to him if any attack he made was going to be worth anything. So far all of their attacks were useless, and Zabuza was just going to block every attack that they made. The sword came to his left, and Sasuke jumped backwards to avoid it. However, before he was completely out of harm's way, the sword whipped around and grazed his arm. How was he going to get closer to him without getting killed? His movements were just too fast. You kids just keep going at this rate, Zabuza continued, the longer you keep me entertained, the longer your friends stay alive, since once I'm done with you, I'm going for the old man. That meant that he would kill everyone guarding him. This was the first time that Sasuke had really been in a serious fight. All the others had been with Jiraiya, Tsunade, or Shizune, none of whom would kill him, or mercenaries who he was eons ahead of. He had never really been in a situation where a mistake that he made would leave him dead, and possibly everyone else. Sasuke was the unofficial second in command of Hakumei, and, deep down, he considered himself probably one of the most powerful of the group. What if the others didn't fare any better than he was? What was he thinking? Sasuke wouldn't allow anyone to hurt the others. Not if he had anything in his power. Give me strength. Sasuke prayed, I have to get stronger. I refuse to lose anyone that I have gained. I don't care if I die here and now, just let me have the power to help them. Sasuke would not see them die after everything that had happened. Hakumei had given him something that only Itachi had given him before. They had laughed with him, trained with him, fought with him, grown up with him. They were more than some ninja team, they were all but family, and the only family that Sasuke now acknowledged other than Itachi. He would never allow anyone to hurt them. Zabuza seemed to shift a little, and then he was right in front of Sasuke. The sword was about to come down to his left, and if he tried to dodge right, it would turn out to be a feint. Sasuke jumped backwards and pivoted off the wall to the left. Zabuza was about to swing from below, and Sasuke turned his body enough so that when the attack hit, it missed. That was when Sasuke noticed what was happened. He could see him. He could see everything that Zabuza was about to do, and could see how he was doing it. Sasuke could see the chakra around him and what it was doing. Everything was so clear. Sharingan. I've done it. Sasuke muttered, elated, I've really done it. Sasuke landed on his feet, Kimimaro appeared next to him. Did you activate it? He asked. Yes, Sasuke said, not able to say anything more. We're not going to lose now, Kimimaro said. Sasuke could hear the satisfaction in his tone. They were going to throw a party after this, and it was going to be bigger than anything else they had ever thrown, including their graduation party. How did you know? Naruto asked, slowly removing his mask, he might as well. I've known since the moment I saw you, Kakashi smiled, of course, even if I hadn't, the Sharingan can see through that wonderful genjutsu you have up. You really did a good job, especially making so that the actual numbers seem a little blurry so that no one will notice that there are 9 of you. That's weird, I don't remember seeing you before, Naruto said, ignoring the compliment. Well, that makes sense, Kakashi said, nodding. You were only 7 at the time, and your sixth sense wasn't what I think it is now. When I had free time, I would keep an eye on you, but it wasn't really necessary. Naruto didn't know what to say to that. It was just his luck to have the one team led by someone who'd recognize him. So, why didn't you expose me from the start? Naruto asked, he was actually rather curious. Well, I didn't really have a reason to, Kakashi said, smiling, you weren't causing any trouble. Then I had my orders sent to me, and I didn't much want to involve you. I could tell that you were fully trained ninja from the start, and I guess that you had been hired to protect Tajuna, but I decided that I would deal with you on my own. What Danzu-sama doesn't know won't help him. Well, I'm the only former Konoha Naruto began. Don't lie, Naruto-kun, you're not as good at it as I am at seeing through it. Your friends are mostly the kids who were kidnapped alongside you, other than a few others you've picked up. You all have done an excellent job of hiding. I really wouldn't have known if I hadn't recognized you, or rather your whiskers. Now that made sense. Blast it, that was the one thing that Naruto couldn't seem able to hide no matter how much he tried to put a genjutsu on it. He could make himself look like another person without a problem, it was just hiding it on him. Well, I'm going to guess that you didn't go through all of this work just to fight me one-on-one without interference. Kakashi trailed off. Naruto tilted his head a little and decided that Kakashi had proven himself as somewhat trustworthy by not exposing them, even if they had turned on Tajuna. Naruto had learned from Jiraiya not to get offended by most of the two-faced tactics of Konoha right now. The ones to be angry with were Danzu and his council, not the ninja. They followed orders, and if they disobeyed, the team would attack him and continue the mission. Besides, if what Jiraiya had said was true, Kakashi was involved in something that couldn't really be considered something Danzo would approve of. He had to make sure he seemed completely loyal. Naruto wondered just how this betrayal really sat with him. My sensei wants me to give you something, Naruto said in a guarded tone. He told me to deliver it personally because you were part of a certain, underground group. Kakashi's eye widened a little. That obviously wasn't the answer that he was expecting. Naruto took out the scroll that Jiraiya had given him to give to Kakashi and slowly walked forwards. Kakashi walked to meet him and Naruto handed him the scroll. Kakashi opened it immediately and began to read. After reading it once, and again, Kakashi looked at Naruto. Thank you very much, he said. Tell Jiraiya-sama that everything is going according to plan. We will be ready to receive him at the Chunin exams. I'll relay the message, Naruto said, wondering just what was going to happen during the Chunin exams. Blast, he should have intercepted the letter. Of course Kakashi wasn't going to tell him. Kakashi was studying him again. It wasn't the cold stare that the Konoha villagers had had when they looked at him, it was more like he was surprised by something. Naruto was getting a little tired of it. You know who I am. I really don't care if you don't like me. I know that I probably am the living reminder of everyone you cared about that Kyuubi killed, but stop staring at me like that. Kakashi shook his head. I'm not thinking about that, although for a long time, I wasn't quite sure what I thought of you. You really look a tremendous amount like my sensei. You're a lot alike too when you're acting serious, when you're joking with your friends, you're more like your mother. Naruto wasn't really expecting that. Well, now that that's settled, why don't you get your friend to let down his sand dome? Kakashi trailed off. Naruto rolled his eyes. We're officially on a mission, Kakashi-san, just because I went through all of this to give you that without your students, two of which I'm very suspicious of, finding something out. I still have to protect the old drunk. I was hoping you'd forgotten, Kakashi admitted. Isaribi collapsed to the ground. The senbon were being purposefully thrown into places that didn't hurt, but caused her muscles to spasm and made her unable to walk or attack. Blast it, why didn't he just kill her and be done with it? You're an idealistic fool, she spat, even if you keep me from aiding Zabuza-san, he'll still kill your comrades. If he does, I'll kill him, the voice was flat. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. What can you do? Isaribi asked, he's stronger than you. I don't need to be as strong as he is. I'll find a way, and if I don't, at least I'll be with my friends. Your friends would abandon you in an instant, Isaribi hissed, it's just how people really are. Even if you don't think you would, when push came to shove you would save yourself. Hara laughed. He actually laughed. Isaribi felt fury rise up inside of her. He didn't know anything about the world. For all his power he was just another idiot like that Haku person. You've never seen it then, she hissed, you've never had someone turn their back on you when you needed them most. Slowly she reached up and took off the bandages on her face and arms. She was satisfied at the small intake of breath that she heard from the man. Her face was surely repulsive to him. Parts of it were covered in scales, and her arms were completely covered. She could change even more into a sea creature if she wanted, but those things would never go away. It's disgusting, isn't it? She screamed, I'm a monster, aren't I? You're afraid and wish to kill me. For a moment Hara was completely silent, that he seemed to find his voice. Who did this to you? It doesn't matter, Isaribi said bitterly, it was done, and when my parents saw, the entire village forced me to live away from them. Do you know why? Because I'm a monster who has no soul. This is what people are like. You don't know, you don't know. No, I don't know. Hara's voice was soft, I have no idea what you've been through. I'm sorry, for all that it's worth. I'm sorry that you have something like that forced on you. It's always the same, everywhere, people who are different are always treated like monsters. You don't have this. Isaribi almost screamed. No, I don't, Hara agreed, mine is an easier burden. I was born with the Hayaton. When you've known nothing but something, you can't miss the life you had, but, why? Why would they do that to you? To make a perfect weapon, Isaribi's legs gave out beneath her, it was an experiment to make ninja who could breathe underwater. I was the first experiment. She didn't know why she was telling him this. She never spoke of her past, but the sorrow that Hara had reacted with had surprised her. She had expected disgust, horror, but not sorrow and compassion. Maybe she just wanted to scream out her story to anyone who cared enough to listen. There's a legend, in the village that I was born in. Sometimes the spirits would kidnap a child and take it with them to their world. If the child reappeared, they weren't really human anymore. The man, Amaka, let me go back because, I don't know, when I came back, my parents refused to come anywhere near me, because I wasn't their child anymore. I was a monster. Then, Amaka came back to me, and told me that he could make me human again. I didn't want to work with him, but, if he had done it, I thought that he could undo it. He told me that as long as I did as I was told, he would turn me into a human again, but, one night, I heard him speaking to someone, a woman with blue hair, saying that I was almost done with my usefulness and I would be killed soon. I had trusted him. I thought that he really was remorseful for what he did to me, but all he wanted was my powers. I killed him that night and ran away. He drowned. I killed him, and I was happy about it. You see, I'm a monster. You're human. You couldn't understand. I was happy. You don't sound happy now, Hara said gently, you sound like you regret it. I didn't when I did it, she hissed, I didn't regret doing it at all. Hara was quiet for a moment, then that means that I'm just as much of a monster as you are. Maybe more of one. Isaribi was silent, her voice had caught in her throat at that statement. I was born in a small farm village in water country. My mother and father and I lived very happily on my father's small wages. It was right after one of the many civil wars between the Mizukage and the Water Daimyo, and one of the prime clans, who had the power of the Hayaton, had been almost completely eliminated. The people feared that clan and felt that anyone who held that bloodline was evil. When I was 8, almost 9, I was playing in the snow, when I found that I could create ice out of nothing. I went to show my mother, not knowing what I had. My mother was a carrier of the Hayaton, which had awoken within me. My mother told me never to show anyone, but my father had seen. He murdered my mother, and turned to kill me. In rage and sorrow, I caused him to be impaled on ice. I didn't regret what I had done, and I'm not sure if I do now. To my father, my mother, and I had ceased to be human the moment he saw me use the Hayaton. We were just monsters. Then why? Isaribi asked, why are you with these people, if you've been betrayed, if they really did that, why? I told you before, when we were gathering herbs together, Hara said, making Isaribi jerk a little, they acknowledged my existence. They found out about my Kekii Genkai, which had caused my own father to think I was a monster, and they accepted me. You're different, Isaribi said, searching for a reason for why she had been cast away by everyone who didn't want to use her. You don't look like a monster. Neither do you, Hara, Haku said. Isaribi could hear a smile in his voice. Then you're not looking, Isaribe said bitterly. What kind of human has scales? The kind that has been through unimaginable pain and suffering that was thrust on them when they shouldn't have had to bear it. Like I said, you've suffered in a different way than I have. You had this thrust on you, while I was born with it. Some of my friends never knew anything other than hatred from others for a very long time. It's not fair, is it? It's not fair that just because we're different they hate us and call us monsters. I want to be a person again. Isaribe muttered. You are human, Isaribe-chan, Haku said, appearing next to her, but ready to disappear if this was a ploy to allow her to attack him. You've always been human. But, you've done nothing that makes you a monster. The monsters are the people who did this to you. Monsters aren't defined by how they look. They're defined by what they do. Isaribe, if you continue with Zabuza-san, you'll become a real monster. But, he said, that he knows someone who might be able to turn me back. Isaribe whispered. Who are they? Haku asked. Isaribe was silent. Her mind was racing. He had never given her a name. In fact, he had never talked about it again after she had agreed to join him 2 years ago. She had always been waiting for him to say that she had paid for her cure. What if he had been lying just like Amaki? She had allowed herself to be tricked again. Tears began to leak out of her eyes. I don't know if he was lying or not, but, my teacher, Tsunade-san is considered the greatest medic in the world, and... Why should I trust you? Isaribe asked. You have to trust someone, Haku said gently. You have to take some kind of gamble, and I'd like to think that I'm a good bet. You don't have to answer me right away, after all, we have a long battle to sit through. Sai was actually very impressed by the Uchiha girl. Sasuke had told them all his theory about her being a plant set up by Danzu, but he still thought of her as the Uchiha girl. Sai had known most of the people his age, and this girl wasn't one of them. Of course, she could have been one of the ones he never saw, or she could have joined later. One thing, however, was certain: her skill was above genin level. She couldn't see through the genjutsu he had placed, it was at least A rank, but she was fighting well anyway. She was carefully launching attacks that had a broad range, but, Sai noticed, she didn't seem to care one way or another about the safety of her teammates, which was perfectly normal root behavior, but also, from what Sai had read, perfectly normal Uchiha behavior. Both Kiba and Shino were staying in one place. Kiba was trying to sniff the air, and Shino seemed to be doing something with his bugs, most likely eating away at the ink snake that he had summoned. Well, they could eat all they wanted, the chakra that had brought them to life had already been used. The only way to get rid of them was to kill them outright. Sai moved to dodge a Gukakua that was going in the right direction, but had no real control. This girl wasn't as good as Sasuke. Even when Sai used his Kokwangyo, Sasuke usually was able to manage to hit him, just by judging from where his attacks were coming from. You're not very proficient. Sai commented. You talk too much, Yumi hissed, throwing a kunao in the direction of his voice and narrowly missing Kiba, who felt the wind of it and cried out in surprise. Don't throw those things over here, he yelled. Nothing is more important than the mission, Yumi stated, including teammates. There is no emotion, Sai said, stating one of the fundamental laws of root: there is no self, there is only the mission. Am I right? So, you understand, Yumi said. Good, I've always wanted to go against an opponent who wasn't weak. I understand perfectly, Sai said, although, I wish I didn't. Yumi grunted. She threw some more kunao, and Sai dodged again. This time she was a bit closer. She dashed towards him, but Sai didn't bother to attack her back. As long as he kept her from harming Tajuna, he didn't have to kill her. Why don't you kill us? Yumi asked. Yumi, Kiba said. I don't have to, Sai replied. If a death is not necessary, I see no reason to kill. So, you're too weak mentally to kill us? Yumi asked. Only someone who's not afraid to die themselves should kill others, Sai said, remembering something that Tsunade had said, and someone who's not afraid to die must come to terms with their own mortality. By doing that, it makes life something that shouldn't easily be destroyed just because you're more powerful. Your mercy will be your undoing, Yumi said coldly, and just for a second, Sai thought he saw. No, that was impossible. Sai quickly drew a succession of lion dogs and sent them on the attack. Yumi drew 2 kunao from her pouch and began to fight almost like they were twin swords. Her motions were fluid, careful, well practiced and had an effortless quality that only came from long familiarity with the fighting style. Sai continued to watch and create more opponents for her. She was doing well, too well. I've decided something, the woman called Nishoku was saying, battles are only interesting if you're involved in them. I've decided something, Raisin replied, Shibuya can sit out the next battle, or Arashi, I don't really care which. Tajuna decided that he really wished that they would stop holding a conversation and focus on what was going on around them. Jeshoku tensed suddenly. I can see someone, she said suddenly, Raisin, do you see the same thing? It seemed that Raisin also tensed a little. No, they must be out of range for me still. You have a greater range than I do. What is it? There's a large group of people coming, Jeshoku said, but I don't see chakra. They must be mercenaries. Wonderful, Nishoku said, sounding pleased, it looks like we may be able to fight after all. We are such psychos, Raisin pointed out. What do you mean we? Jeshoku asked. Suzuki knew all of the legends of the Sharinan. He had grown up on them, and even once he had left, he still read about it, in hopes that when he activated it, he could use it quickly. He knew that usually it activated at a very low state of power, only with one kama-like tomo in each eye. The tomo allowed him to see different things, ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. He had tried to learn as much as he could, but nothing he had read came close to what he was experiencing. Suzuki didn't know how many tomos had awakened, but he had a feeling that it was 2. After all, he could see both his taijutsu and ninjutsu. The Sharinan was changing the flow of the battle. Suzuki wasn't just trying to get away from his attacks, he was attacking with Kimimaro. Zabuza seemed to agree that the battle was changing, he wasn't playing with them anymore. Kirigaku or no jutsu, he said as more mist began to appear and make it impossible to see around them. Too bad the Sharinan could see right through it. Haka, Suzuki said, he's going to attack from the left. Got it, Kimimaro said, dashing into the area Suzuki pointed out, sword drawn and ready. There was a clash and Kimimaro's bone sword and Zabuza's sword met each other. Suzuki knew from experience just how strong and sharp Kimimaro's sword was, and just the fact that it was holding up against Zabuza was proof enough. Both of them were pushing against one another, trying to force the other to jump back and give an opening. Suzuki took out one of the many scrolls under his haori and bit his thumb. There was a poof of smoke and a large shuriken appeared in his hands. He threw it at the exact time that Kimimaro jumped back, forcing Zabuza to dodge, and giving Suzuki time to run in for an attack. Zabuza swung his sword, but Suzuki jumped, landing on top of it and continuing his dash towards him, kunao appearing in his hands. Zabuza let the sword go with one hand with a kunao of his own, to block Suzuki's attack. Suzuki, in a flash of inspiration, kept running and jumped over the startled ninja, turning in midair and throwing the kunao, not at Zabuza's vitals, but at his arms. Zabuza realized a little too late and didn't quite have the time to dodge before 2 kunao grazed his arms and the bone sword had managed to slice a bit of his side. Suzuki was out of breath and his legs were threatening to give out. This was the amount of work that it took to fight a Jonin-level opponent. In a way it was exhilarating and in another, Suzuki just wanted to go to bed. Kimimaro was breathing hard too. This was different than the endless training sessions with Jiraiya. Jiraiya was an opponent who they had learned to read, which made things much easier. You know, Suzuki said, sounding a little tired, for our first real opponent, I think we're doing good. I hope so, Kimimaro muttered, just hitting this guy is hard. Both of them were facing Zabuza and preparing to continue the attack. You know, Zabuza said, getting back into an attack position, but not quite holding the sword right because of the wounds, I'm going to have to take you kids seriously. Consider this a compliment, I haven't really had to fight someone like this in a long time. Suzuki looked over at Kimimaro. He was starting to look tired as well. This might turn into an endurance fight, something that neither of them were good at. Suzuki hated to admit it, but he was the product of a careful breeding program. It produced shinobi who were light, fast, and built to complete missions quickly. He had a fairly high amount of chakra, but one thing that the Uchiha had never put much store for was endurance or strength. It was true that Sasuke had tried to build up his endurance, but the fact was he wasn't built for long fights. That was Naruto and Gaara's speciality, particularly Naruto. He had seen his friend train for almost 3 weeks straight. Granted, Naruto had almost collapsed and died right there, but he had done it. If they got into an endurance fight, Sasuke would lose. Kimimaro wasn't that much better off. Even though he had been cured of tainted blood when he was younger, it appeared to have already been doing some damage. Kimimaro would sometimes get tired if he used his Kekkei Genkai too much. It didn't always happen, and Sasuke prayed that it wouldn't happen this time. Zabuza charged forwards his sword in a killing arc, but it looked like Sasuke's Kunao had damaged some muscle, because the swing was slower than it should have been and slightly clumsy, allowing Sasuke and Kimimaro to dodge, barely. "What a disgusting display," a voice said coldly, cutting through the mist. Naruto turned around when Gaara appeared through the sand. Gaara had long ago learned how to turn into sand in order to spy and to travel quickly. He had turned into sand in order to attack Kakashi if he had proved himself to be untrustworthy. Kakashi didn't look surprised at the sudden appearance, he had probably guessed he was there. "There are a group of people who've turned up. One of them looks like Geto," Gaara told him. "What do you want to do?" "Release the dome," Kakashi said suddenly. "I still have a mission to complete involving Geto. Thanks to his timely appearance, I and my team don't have to bother Tajuna-san anymore." Naruto looked over at Gaara, and both reached an unspoken agreement. "If you attack Tajuna-san, I will kill you," Gaara said softly. Kakashi looked like he believed him. As Naruto replaced his mask, Kakashi smiled at him. "I'll see you at the exam, Naruto-kun," he said. "What?" The dome began to disintegrate around them, giving Naruto a good look at what was going on. Sai's genjutsu was still in perfect effect. That wasn't much of a surprise since Sai was probably the best at performing genjutsu other than Sakura, and that was one of Sai's best techniques. He really did live up to the name of Shinen no Sai. The Dome of Mirrors showed that Haku was also perfectly fine. The only one of them who could escape that jutsu without a problem was Gaara. Sasuke and Kimimaro were both starting to look a little worse for wear, and Sasuke was bleeding. The battle between those two had stopped though, and Zabuza was staring at something that Naruto noticed for the first time. At the opposite side of the bridge, a large group of rough, dangerous-looking men had congregated. They were holding swords and clubs, but they didn't look like they were well trained. Naruto recognized mercenaries when he saw them, and cheap ones at that. There were almost always ninja mercenaries running around. Half of them were mission nin, but there were those whose ancestors had survived the fall of various villages, and had not engulfed themselves into another village the way most families did. Naruto knew for a fact that the Nara family was the remainder of a large and powerful family from a village known as Kage. Talk about unoriginal. The fact that this guy had not hired ninja showed one of two things: either he was cheap, or he was stupid. Possibly both. No common mercenary could go up against an academy student, let alone a real ninja. Mercenaries were meant to be the grunts in an army. They hadn't been trained to kill from the moment that they could walk the way that most ninja had been. The man was short and fat-looking. He had dark glasses on and a very unpleasant smirk. Something told Naruto that this was Geto. He looked over at Zabuza and his smirk widened. "You call yourself the demon of the mist?" He sneered. "Maybe a baby demon, but you can't even win against a group of stray ninja that this old man dug up." Zabuza turned to face him, and Naruto didn't have to be an expert at reading people to see that he wasn't happy. "You know, I never was going to pay you," Geto was gloating. "I was just going to poison you once you'd done the job, but you know something, I like this better. Ninja are so ridiculously expensive." Naruto noticed that Kakashi had vanished, and that the darkness around the genin seemed to be dispersing, but whether it was the fact that Sai was finally starting to get tired or that Kakashi was doing something, he couldn't tell. "Hakumei," Zabuza said loudly, "our disagreement is officially dissolved. I have no more interest or need for the old man. Do what you want to my assistant, but I want his head." The dome of mirrors around where Haku was began to recede, so Haku was listening. Zabuza didn't seem remotely interested in his assistant. He was dashing towards Geto with his sword raised, but he never had the chance to hit. Kakashi appeared behind Geto, throwing a barrage of exploding tags at Zabuza, who didn't have time to dodge. He was winded and a little slow from his battle. He should have avoided the attack easily, but as it was, he avoided the tags themselves, but the explosion sent him flying off of the bridge. There was a splash and Naruto didn't see anything more of Zabuza. He had a faint impression of something on the other side of the bridge jumping off, but shook it off. Hakumei had all formed a barrier around Tajuna, waiting to see just what would happen and ready to attack. Geto turned to face Kakashi with a smirk and probably a promise to reward him for his help, but anything he was going to say was forgotten by Kakashi's words. "I'm here on an assignment, Geto. I was hired by Watanabe-san to assassinate you. The conditions were that you must know who had killed you and that your head be brought to the client." Kakashi's voice was completely emotionless. "No, wait, I'll pay dash." Whatever Geto was going to say was never finished. He was dead before he could complete the sentence and before the mercenaries had time to react. One moment Kakashi was standing behind Geto, the next he was in front of his team with Geto's head. "Kai," he said, calmly dispersing what was left of Sai's jutsu. Keeble looked around frantically, trying to get his bearings. Shino seemed completely indifferent, only once looking over to Hakumei and bowing his head, apparently acknowledging defeat. Yumi stood calmly, a kunao in both hands, looking like she was prepared to continue or retreat, depending on Kakashi's orders. "Hey, you!" One of the mercenaries called, his brain finally back in circulation. "You killed our meal ticket." "Forget him, let's loot the village," another, calmer voice said. "Fighting ninja is for idiots." "You're right." Someone else yelled, pointing at Hakumei, "Let's loot and kill these guys, they're not real ninja." "Number one rule for being a cliché hero," a young voice said, "always arrive late, it adds to the drama." Naruto turned to see Inari along with what looked like Olive Wave standing at the base of the bridge. With him were 9 Bunshin in the forms of himself, Sasuke, Sai, Neji, Sakura, Gaara, Kimimaro, Hinata, and Haku. Naruto mentally patted himself on the back. No one would think that they were Hakumei now. Unless they were Kakashi. "You're not wanted on this island." One of the men who Naruto recognized as a former bridge worker yelled. "And what are you going to do about it?" A mercenary asked mockingly. "You guys don't have any real weapons." "But they do have us," Gaara said softly as sand began to snake around the feet of the mercenaries. "Leave. Now. Or you will regret it." "Your deaths are unnecessary," Hinata said in just as soft a voice, "but if you insist, we will kill you." The mercenaries wavered. For some reason, the masked figures disturbed them slightly. There was something about them that said that they were all trained killers, who would have no objections to attacking if they made the wrong move. "Oh, come on," Neji muttered, "let's just kill them and be done with it. I didn't get a chance to fight anyway, this ought to be interesting." "Jeshoku, Nishoku, Raisin," Naruto said, "looks like you get to see battle after all. Don't damage the bridge." "Hi," 3 voices chorused. This time, the mercenaries had had enough. They ran, only to have the 3 in hot pursuit. "That ought to keep them busy," Naruto sighed, "and keep the complaints down." "Now all we have to deal with is the other problem," Sasuke said. "What other problems?" Kimimaro asked, then noticed the genin. "Ah, those problems." Keeble looked like he was both ready and willing to try to take all 6 present members on single-handedly. "All right, let's crush them," Kiba said, already getting ready to make a dash for Naruto. "Kiba, stand down," Kakashi said calmly, "the mission is over, Geto's head has been recovered." "But," Keeble looked shocked, "what about them? We have no more need to fight them. They were hired to protect Tajuna-san, and we are no longer going to threaten him. The mission is complete. We are returning to Konoha." "Excellent," Yumi said, "this place's filth was beginning to make me ill." Shino said nothing. Without a word of farewell, the 3 Konohanin vanished, but before they had left, Naruto had seen Kakashi look back at them and at Tajuna. There was sorrow in his eyes. Just for a second, Naruto wondered just how awful it would be to have to follow orders that were against everything he stood for. To have to pretend that you were loyal to someone who secretly you wished only the most painful of deaths. It was impossible for him to hate Kakashi. After all, what would he have done in that situation? Naruto turned to Tajuna and looked around for Tsunami's face. She was already waiting through the crowd to get closer to them. When she had reached the forefront, she took a while to collect herself. I don't know if I or anyone in Wave will ever be able to thank you enough, she said softly. Don't thank us, Haku said, the Konoha killed Geto. Yes, but you made sure that my father was safe, you got rid of the mercenaries, and according to Taki-kun here, you made sure that no one attacked the house, Tsunami said, patting a Bunshin who was looking rather pleased with the situation. She took out an envelope and smiled a little. This is the money that you asked for, but I don't think that it will ever cover our gratitude. You've done so much for Wave, even before this. Naruto took the envelope, and felt a weight in his heart. He had planned on just disappearing, but it didn't look like it was possible. What happened to Zabuza? Someone asked. He was knocked over the bridge during the fight, and his assistant went after him, Haku supplied. So he's still alive? Inari asked, sounding frightened. Possibly, Haku said, but I doubt it. Naruto knew from the slight lift in Haku's voice that he was lying. Zabuza had survived and he was covering up for him. Why? Naruto bowed to Tsunami politely. It was an honor to help such good people. Unfortunately, the time has come for us to leave. Before anyone could say anything, Sasuke spoke up. Those ninja know that we're here, and they will report our presence to their superiors. If we don't leave now, there'll be trouble for all of you when they come to collect us. Our presence is a danger to you. Villages dislike large, organized groups of ninja running around free, so it's best for all of us if we leave. Inari turned to the Naruto Bunshin. Does that mean you're leaving too, Taki Aizen? The Bunshin laughed a little, putting one hand behind his head. Yeah, we work for them, and well. Inari looked like he was getting ready to cry, and he put his head down. Hey, the Bunshin said, don't be too sad, I'll see you again. Hakumei's jobs take us all over the place, so we'll see each other again one day. Who knows, maybe we'll be back sooner than you, or I, think. Inari looked a little happier at that statement. Further conversation was interrupted by the return of Niji, Hinata, and Sakura. Are they gone? Sai asked. They're probably halfway to Lightning Country at the rate they were going, Niji said. He sounded rather pleased with himself. Inari sniffed a little bit and looked up at Hakumei. Tears were still in his eyes, but he was controlling himself. Thank you, Ninja Sans, he said softly. He sniffed again. Make sure you send Taki Aizen and the others back here soon. Sakura leaned forwards, and Naruto heard her whisper to him, don't worry, we'll be back one day. Oh, and no matter what Masaru says, real men can cry, you don't have to be a rock all the time. She straightened and they all looked at the faces of the people around them. They were grateful, and happy looking. Something about them had changed. They didn't have a hangdog, defeated air about them anymore. There was something in them that looked like they were ready to fight again. That weren't really cowards, they had just had to be shown that they did have a chance to win against seemingly more powerful enemies. Naruto was sure that Inari's father would have been happy. Everyone, sayonara. All of them, including the Bunshin, disappeared in smoke. Inari looked over at his grandfather. They were really great ninja, weren't they? Tajuna nodded and looked around at the bridge. For all the fighting and struggle that went into building this thing, it needs a good name. How about the Great Hakumei Bridge? Inari suggested. Tajuna grinned and there were some cheers and claps in the crowd. I like it. With a name like that, this bridge will last forever and be a lasting sign to never give up in the face of adversity. Check the description for the links to the author.